With the release of Fortnite OG last year, Fortnite saw one of its biggest comebacks of all time, as the return of the Chapter 1 Island was arguably the most anticipated addition ever since its removal in 2019. Player accounts surged and were so massive that Epic promised to bring back the OG season again this year, and they are, except this time the map returning is going to be Chapter 2's, and this is where everything begins to crumble. Fortnite has a rich history of being given the greatest opportunities and somehow still managing to disappoint with their decisions. Just take Peter Griffin for example, who was added as a muscular version of himself only for us to realize that his show accurate version was completely scrapped. It gets worse when you realize that Epic released the giant chicken skin during the same exact season, and it becomes clear that the hitbox was never the issue, so naturally everyone's reaction was to ask why they would do that to one of their most awaited collab characters. But the answer to this is money. Fortnite lately has been too caught up in re-releasing skins and making as much revenue from item shop outfits as possible. Buff Peter being in the battle pass in Chapter 5 Season 1 is fine because they could drop the show accurate fat version in the shop later on. Or take Iron Man years ago, who recently was given another reskin in the item shop, and even Deadpool was originally a battle pass outfit who now has a cell shaded version in the item shop presented as a new skin. And this is where the OG seasons come in, because they're Epic's new way of grabbing attention from the world and shifting it right to the item shop. In the first OG season, we saw a massive surge of player counts, which was the perfect chance for Epic to drop new skins in both the pass and the shop. They introduced us to the OG pass because the season was only a month long and we were only given half a pass to complete, containing just 4 skins that were fused versions of past Chapter 1 battle pass skins, like Omega Rock. Players were of course caught off guard when they realized that even though it was only half of a battle pass, they still had to pay the same amount of V-Bucks as a regular one, and they did, meaning Epic now knows that whether they give us 4 skins or 8, players are still going to buy the pass for the same price. And keep this in mind because we'll be revisiting it later, but therefore by the OG seasons having a big nostalgia bait for players to revisit the game in order to play with their favorite map and potentially spend on in-game purchases, there arises another big problem. With confirmation that at the end of this year, before Chapter 6 we'll be playing on the Chapter 2 map, everyone's asking how many more times can an OG season be pulled off. No one can argue that the first time was special because everyone in the community and outside of it had a soft spot for Chapter 1, and we had no idea, but now the same can't be said for Chapter 2. At the time of its availability, Fortnite was on a decline, but over the years people have come to realize that it was one of the greatest chapters in the game's history. However, with Epic continuing to do OG seasons before a big chapter, it now becomes extremely predictable as to what we could expect every year. Chapters are already getting repetitive because of their yearly cycles, and knowing that from now on we'll get an OG season at November ruins the element of surprise for many. So let's say Epic continues their streak, where we can expect the OG season for next year to feature Chapter 3 and its map alongside remixed skins from the battle pass, and then after that Chapter 4 and so on. This thought alone has already created lots of discussion in the community about the fatigue created by the OG seasons. Sure, it's nice when it's done once or twice, but it happening every single year at the same time is something not many players really want. As much as people love the past chapters of Fortnite, we all want to experience new gameplay mechanics and seasons for the game to keep evolving. But for a lot of players, returning the game to a state it was at years ago just isn't it. Take last year for example, where there was a rumor zero build and the new movement mechanics like sprinting or mantling would be of course removed in favor of Chapter 1. But this ended up not happening because there was a massive outburst of complaints at Epic even if they attempted it. This shows that while a big portion of the community is excited for replaying the past chapters, there's also those who aren't very happy with it and simply want to keep playing new experiences instead of reliving the past. But to add to this here is the problem in itself. The OG season was a massive hit, but after the nostalgia wore off and a lot of people realized that no matter what Epic does, it isn't really going to hit the same as it did when Chapter 1 and its seasons were first released. I gotta admit, I loved revisiting and playing on the old map, but it would be impossible to capture that same exact vibe and feeling of Fortnite again for the very first time. But when we thought it couldn't get any more problematic, there's another issue regarding OG seasons that have to do with live events. Chapter 1 originally concluded with the end event, one of the most iconic moments in all of gaming's history because of the aftermath with its black hole, and because it was the last time players would be on the Chapter 1 map until its unexpected return last year. There was only one appropriate way to end Chapter 1's short return again, and after a month passed, Epic recreated this same end event, but this time it was very different. They knew that because this was their first live event in a year, they had everyone's attention attention, and in order to push their plan of expanding Fortnite to be a bigger platform, they needed everyone to see what they'd planned while player counts were high. And so what everyone expected to see was a final goodbye to Chapter 1 as a whole, with a recreated end event filled with storyline that was building up during the season. But this ended up being what the majority of players felt was a big Metaverse promotional ad. For years, Epic had been working on their 3 new modes that would now be a part of Fortnite as a whole. Unveiled in the event were LEGO Fortnite Racing and Festival, even featuring an Eminem concert. But prior to that, Epic had even teased that there was going to be a big reveal at the end of the event, which at the time everyone assumed would be related to the storyline, only to find out that it was basically nothing. We assume it was the different galaxies being shown, but no one can say for sure. This was supposed to be memorable, but it left a lot of players disappointed, as this was the first live event in a year for only half of it to be an ad to Epic's collabs, leaving us with more questions than answers. And so now we know that this year Epic also planned a big live event right before Chapter 6, thanks to the leaked roadmap image, and we even have seen leaks about what the event will be, but here's what's really not going to make sense. Chapter 2 as a whole had many different iconic events, like the fight with Galactus, the end event where the map literally flipped and Dwayne Johnson was revealed as the Foundation, and more. But the one that is going to be returning is the Device event. That's right, because the event we'll be replaying is going to be Fortnite's Device event, as leaked by some game files that Epic had been secretly adding behind the scenes. It partially makes sense as to why they would choose it, since it's one of Chapter 2's most story-filled events, but it's also for Chapter 2 OG, where we're only revisiting the first 3 seasons of Chapter 2. But here's the confusing part, because the Device event took place in Chapter 2 Season 2, while we all are supposed to play on the flooded map of Chapter 2 Season 3. But if the map only flooded because of the Device event, how is it going to happen this time around if the event needs to happen while we're already in Chapter 2 Season 3? It sounds messy, and either Epic didn't think this through or they know exactly what they're doing. After the Big Bang, all players have now begun speculating that Epic doesn't really care for live events anymore, at least not about their storyline. They redeemed themselves as of late with characters like the Wanderer, but them changing gears to focus on expanding their platform was confirmed by Donald Mustard during a recent interview, and we'll touch on all that soon. But if the Big Bang was a version of an iconic event playing out the same again until it eventually turns into an advertisement for this year's modes, it's possible Epic is planning on doing the same thing for this year's live event. Epic have definitely worked on a new set of modes, and if they're aiming to release them alongside Chapter 6, then you can expect the Device event to be turned into just another big push for Epic's Metaverse. The rabbit hole goes deeper once you realize how many other projects Epic have scrapped in the last few years in favor of them pushing the Metaverse in Fortnite. As revealed by Donald himself in an interview, for the new modes to be brought to life, Epic needed many resources, and to effectively gain them, they shifted their focus from other projects into the big 3. Even though Racing and Festival have their respective teams from companies to work on them, it looks like LEGO Fortnite was a big project that took a lot of time to develop, as it's the biggest of all 3. But part of the reason Donald disagreed with Epic's recent decisions was because of their choice to abandon live events as a whole and move the teams responsible for them into their new projects. Even Donald knew that live events and their storyline are massive for Fortnite, and it was the reason many players would gather around regardless of how long they played the game in order to view a spectacular experience with amazing music and visuals, something other games just can't match. Their success was clear as well, with live events like Travis Scott and Galactus reaching astronomical numbers. Travis's event has over 200 million views on YouTube, and there were many concurrent players in Galactus's event, so it leaves a lot of players disappointed to know that from now on, Epic treats their live events, one of the game's biggest additions, as a yearly occurrence only to serve as big ads and even baiting people with nostalgia by reusing past events to an extent. And some of you will already know that live events aren't the only thing Epic decided to abandon for new modes. There's countless limited time modes that we're just missing now, whether it was 50v50, sniper shootout, or close encounter. There always used to be something made by Epic aside from regular battle royale to make the game feel refreshing. But ever since Fortnite stopped bringing back old LTMs in rotation like they used to, this once again is because of their decision to focus solely on content for their new main modes. Like Imposters, a very fun mode inspired by the popular game Among Us, which was something very different and refreshing within Fortnite, until it was mysteriously removed with no explanation whatsoever. And to this day, there's no statement regarding it. But like the rest, we can only assume this was Epic moving forward with their mastermind Metaverse plan. Adding to this, for Epic to be able to release the 3 modes during the Chapter 5 launch, it was easily noticeable that they had to rush these. They were missing key gameplay features at launch, and other improvements that were added later on. Epic wasn't just canceling projects like LTMs or live events, they were also rushing when working on the OG season itself. Let me explain. Well, during Chapter 1 OG, for the most part, the OG map was very accurate, and the dedicated player base of the game couldn't help but notice that throughout the entire map, there were little inconsistencies after warming up to it. If you dropped in at tilted, started during the launch of Fortnite OG, the first thing you would notice is that an iconic building was missing, and instead, in its place, there was another one that wasn't even meant to be there. This is the infamous No Sweat building, which was actually added during Season 8 of Chapter 1 instead of Season 5, replacing one of Fortnite's most iconic towers. Even Fatal Fields had a completely unnecessary change, where the middle house that was already supposed to be there was removed, and instead Epic copy and pasted a barn that was already next to that house in its place. This was a common theme around the map, and even from some of the houses over by Snobby Shores, they weren't accurate to the actual Chapter 1 map. Week by week, it was more evident that Epic had done a really good job recreating the map, but in doing so, they'd rushed the creation to the point where players felt like they were playing on a creative island. It was great, don't get me wrong, but by the time the second week of Season OG was out, everyone was excited for the appearance of Kevin the Cube on the map once again, as leaks had indicated the original plan was for Kevin to spawn in a mini live event just like he did back in the day, and then make his way to Loot Lake before the arrival of the floating island. It was planned in the files and had all of us excited, but we quickly came to realize that Epic had just scrapped this idea because Kevin never appeared. And instead, the floating island simply came to be from a hotfix. It didn't even stop there, as when trying to see if Kevin the Cube worked like it once did, bouncing people off or zapping players who were shooting at it, we were upset to find out that it didn't even do that. It was clear Epic was indeed using their own creative prefabs and bridging them over to Battle Royale to avoid working too much on certain gameplay aspects, like the cube, at the same time making the seasons feel inaccurate. And even in the Big Bang event, the floating island just disappeared to make way for the rockets. It didn't make any sense. But imagine the complaints that started rolling out when it was time for one of the most beloved seasons to be recreated, Chapter 1 Season 7. Instead of the giant snow biome that we once got covering a giant part of the map, we only received a small version of it containing frosty flights and a broken polar peak, even though this was originally added in Season 9. Not only did they completely skip Happy Hamlet, one of the most popular POIs of all time, but Season 8 suffered an even worse fate. They took away its biome in order to not remove any of the classic POIs and only added the pirate outposts across the map. And even those were straight up placed in the wrong areas instead of their original positioning. I know I'm nitpicking, but Season 9 just straight up was skipped, and for Season X they only brought back the meteor above Dusty Depot. The inconsistencies were not only appearing on the map, but also in the loopholes, showing us that Epic doesn't even know their own game, or that they didn't bother to be as accurate as possible. Like how the gold pump wasn't introduced until Season 6, but it was available in Season 5. The drift boards were added in Season 7 for the first time, but instead now they were added in Season 6, with Epic themselves acknowledging this in their blog post. Or certain items didn't make it in because they received changes prior to the OG season, like Slurp Juice reworked in Chapter 4, and Epic avoided all of this instead of just making a separate version. OG season was good, but it definitely had its flaws, and now people are worried about what Chapter 2 OG will look like and if Epic have truly learned from their mistakes, and it's already not looking too good. Epic knows that if they want this to be a success, they'll have to make an extremely accurate version of Chapter 2 to deliver us with the best experience possible, because this time nostalgia itself isn't going to carry this season to number 1. This time, instead of replaying all of the Chapter 2 seasons, Epic's instead chosen only the first 3, meaning we won't get to see some of the highlights of Chapter 2 like the sand biome with sand tunneling, or even Chapter 2 Season 7, which is considered to be one of the greatest seasons the game's ever had because of the revolutionary items during its run. And don't even get me started on us missing the Marvel season, but a lot of people are upset over why Epic would cut from Chapter 2 many of their best seasons, and the answer is simple. Chapter 2 Season 2 is arguably the chapter's highlight, and also one of Epic's most profitable seasons ever, so it's natural they would want this to be their main map for a while. Leaks are also indicating that the schedule for Chapter 2 OG will look something like this. We'll start off in Chapter 2 Season 1, then Season 2, and finally we'll finish things off with Season 3. If they want this to work, Epic have to be consistent. The map, mechanics, and loot pool for Top Secret will need to be as accurate as possible, because it's known how special this season is in the community. Even a small change like bringing in a nerfed version of Midas's drum gun like we saw Epic do in Chapter 4 Season 4 would cause major backlash, and the whole thing would blow up in Epic's face. Regardless of what Epic end up doing this year during the OG season, fans haven't stopped thinking about what they could have done instead for this direction that they're currently heading in. Instead of just 3 seasons, it would have definitely been better to see some other seasons featured as well, from the other half of Chapter 2. Like the Marvel season, one of the highest ranking seasons ever, and the one that's definitely left its mark in Fortnite's history, given that because of its success, we're currently having another one. Even though we're already revisiting a Marvel season, it definitely wouldn't have hurt for us to revisit that season on the Chapter 2 map as well. After all, it did have mythic powers that we still haven't gotten in game currently, and even the iconic upstate New York biome with Stark Industries POI would be so easy to add. Then Zero Crisis Season 5 also would have gotten a great chance to shine with the rest of Chapter 2, as it's one of the most underrated seasons. Now, I'm sure most of the people playing would rather forget about Chapter 2 Season 6, as it's regarded as the worst season of all time in Fortnite. So if there was a season that Epic could have skipped in an ideal version of Chapter 2 OG, this would be it. But then would come Season 7 Invasion, arguably a top 3 season for Chapter 2 as a whole. The Abductors, a mothership minigame, or even weapons like the ray gun, and most importantly the Gravitron, a fan favorite that disappeared after its season, never for us to see it ever again. And no one can argue that even Season 8 with all its cubes had some interesting elements like the Caretaker boss fights or the Sideways dimension. The first 3 seasons will be crucial as well, because this time we're all waiting to see if Epic actually learned from their mistakes. Them doing way less seasons than the first OG means they have more time to work on it, and therefore we can expect them to be more accurate in terms of map changes and gameplay. Season 3's core mechanic was the water levels rising and submerging a big portion of the map underwater. This means that if Epic want to recreate it accurately, they'll be forced to replace the most iconic Chapter 2 POIs for the last week, and even get rid of the agency, Chapter 2's most iconic POI, to replace it with the Authority. That once again heavily depends on how the live event for Chapter 2's finale is going to be executed, and if it'll be done hastily and out of order simply to serve as a promotion for a new batch of Epic made modes. As said previously, the reason for the downfall of Epic's Metaverse was because of how rushed the modes felt when they were released. And even now there's lots of issues as to why their plan for every season OG to bring attention to these new modes is failing. Let's start with LEGO Fortnite, which is the most successful of all 3 as proven by its player count. After its release, it received many small updates, with the biggest ones being a Star Wars themed update for May the 4th, adding a live event to our LEGO world, and even more recently the brand new Colombo update, which according to some players is actually pretty decent, as for the first time they added a variety of new things like a new biome, the return of Colombos and LEGO ones, and even a LEGO pass. While the mode's pretty fun to play with friends, it lacks a very key aspect which everyone can agree on, and that is replayability. LEGO Fortnite was Epic's attempt to rival Minecraft as a sandbox survival game, but what they didn't realize was that unlike Minecraft, LEGO Fortnite doesn't have an end goal. Sure, you could build almost anything you can imagine, have cool collabs like Star Wars in your world, but after that there's no purpose in the game, making it pointless to keep playing if you're looking for something more than just world building. Now, Festival is the second most successful mode of all 3, and it has consistent updates this past year. There's new jam tracks every Thursday, and we even saw Epic add the ability to play those in the lobby as lobby tracks, making them a lot more worth it than they first were. It even got a side mode in the form of Battle Stage, which basically was a PvP mode. Just like LEGO, the mode also comes with the seasonal pass and cosmetics of its own, with a big complaint about the mode being that it doesn't let you use its cosmetics in Battle Royale as well. There's lots of cool guitar designs that could become pickaxes, or even the aura effect could be a new type of cosmetic used in Battle Royale, but it's not. Then there's Rocket Racing, which is easily the least successful of all 3, and it also has become the least updated. After it was released, there were several issues with the game mode being clunky, but improvements were made for a smoother racing experience. Another issue was the ranked system, making people rank up painfully slow even if they would finish first. We thought it'd be a fun game like Mario Kart, but instead it's just a typical racing game, and even its first season, Neon Rush, was cancelled, so Epic decided to scrap the entire season system for this mode and instead roll out new content for it at a much slower rate. The issue with all these modes is that above all, they feel like they're being simply made for monetization purposes by Epic. Both passes for Festival and LEGO cost way more than the Battle Royales, even though in reality they offered less rewards. The same could be said for the item shop, which is filled with LEGO kits, jam tracks, instruments, and cars like Lambos or Cybertrucks that you can buy, and there have been multiple complaints regarding their prices. This way, Epic has one thing in mind, that no matter what, they can now offer passes or cosmetics in general at a much higher price for less value, just like they did with the OG pass, because people will still buy it just to not miss out. But the worst part has to be the sacrifices made in favor of the new modes and the controversial changes that they cause. Ever since their addition, every change Fortnite has made has been in favor of the new modes to highlight them as equal or even superior to Battle Royale. The Locker received a massive UI overhaul to fit the arrival of new cosmetics for the different modes, but doing so completely ruined the once easy and straightforward system the original Locker had, making people demotivated to go through the effort of even just changing their skin. Even the item shop has an unwritten rule, which is that cosmetics that are featured have to be accessible in all modes, which is the reason that some emotes you'll see aren't in cosmetic bundles anymore, as to return they'll have to have support for LEGO Fortnite. Of all the changes though, the one that hurt the most was the removal of rarities. What had been a distinctive part of the game for years was taken out, and suddenly with one single update, because it was now considered outdated by Epic and that it didn't fit the system of multiple mode cosmetics. This is also something that allows them to easily increase prices of skins, since there would be no way of telling what rarity they are anymore. Now, Battle Pass skins also can come back at free will, because with with Absolute Doom, it's the first patch where Epic announced that skins can come back after 18 months. All this comes down to the fact that if Epic intends to use this year's Season OG as nothing more than another previous cash grab and advertise their next set of modes as well as previous ones, then it's certain Chapter 2 OG is doomed. There's already a disadvantage with the map not being as popular as Chapter 1, and it'll be harder to grab attention this year, especially if the experience ends up being made poorly instead of carefully with the attention to detail that it deserves. We can only hope Epic's learned from their mistakes and has taken notes from the community that they can use to deliver a proper trip to the past. Like and subscribe for more, and YouTube thinks you'll enjoy this video, so I'll see you there.